little bit of an outline today. As much as we have a little bit of an outline today, we really want to keep it organic. As Melissa said, we're going to be asking some questions initially, and then we're hoping to get some questions from the audience. For some of you who don't know, my name is Mike Alaka. I'm president of Alaka Enterprises, and I do export-import compliance training. I started out as a freight forwarder up in Albany, New York. Let's see if I can get my New York, Long Island accent back. I grew up on Long Island. I grew up by the water. I do normally talk like this. I was a forwarder for 10 years. What are you talking about? I don't have an accent. So sometimes if I get excited or I get talk too fast, I mess up a word. So please let me know. I've had people say, Mike, could you repeat that? What's a forwarder? And so, just let me know. That being said, I was a freight forwarder for 11 years. I did ocean export, imports. That's how I learned about international trade. I got a chance to travel around the world, trying to understand the import-export process in other countries. But I'm really somebody who can talk very knowledgeably about U.S. export and U.S. import regs. So I do trainings, I have videos, and I don't just teach it, I do it. I write export procedures. I do free trade agreement determinations or HTS classifications. So that's my background, that's my bio. I definitely have a couple of detailed questions for the speakers today, and hopefully you all do as well. I moved down to the South. I'm now in upstate South Carolina, so I've had to slow things down a little bit. But I love it. I've been here about 13 years, and I'm just glad to be here. So that being said, we're very excited today. We have three great guest speakers today on the panel, and I'm going to initially introduce them and then have them speak a little bit about themselves. So we're very excited today to have our guest panelist, Susan from the EXIM Bank. I've just gotten to know her a little bit with some of the practice sessions that we've done, but I'm really excited. She seems extremely knowledgeable, and I'm a big fan of the EXIM Bank. I have been for many years. So Susan, I'd like to turn it over to you to maybe just say a little bit more about your background. We would appreciate any insight you have.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Kintanar, and I represent the Export-Import Bank of the United States government. Such a long name, right? I have 30 years behind me of international banking experience. I'm based here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I cover Georgia, Tennessee, North and South Carolina. To make it easier for everybody to understand what the Export-Import Bank of the United States is, because it's a long name, let me start with the first word, export. Actually, we only deal with exports of made in the USA products and services, at least 51% US content, shipped from the US to countries that we can do business with in accordance to our country limitation schedule. And you can find that at www.exim.gov. It tells you if we support or not support the country. Okay, the next word, Export-Import Bank, import. We do not support imports into the United States, but why is the word import there? It's because we certainly support foreign buyers who import into their own countries by buying products and services from the United States. Next word is bank, Export-Import Bank. We are not a commercial bank. We do not accept deposits or CDs, etc. We don't even lend directly. We lend through our delegated lenders. We have taught our delegated lenders what we want when it comes to creditworthiness. They're certified from our Washington, D.C. office, and they lend on our behalf. So if something goes wrong with the borrower, then EXIM Bank comes in to salvage the lender. As a value-added service, of course, product, we also have the credit insurance program. We sell credit insurance to exporters, and this is a direct relationship between EXIM Bank and the exporter. We want to encourage you to provide credit terms and venture into countries that you've never tried before. How can we give you confidence? Well, first of all, we will vet your foreign buyer to determine if they're good enough to do business with you and with us. And if you ship on credit terms, right? Instead of just cash in advance, cash it in advance. I mean, it's competitive out there and they don't pay you. We EXIM Bank will come in to salvage you. We'll give you the money and we'll be the one to run after the foreign buyer. And of course, the credit insurance policy can also be assigned to the lender so that the lender can increase their level of confidence to lend against those increased receivables. Okay, Export-Import Bank of the US government. US government, we're the federal arm of the government, and our goal is to boost the economy of the United States by supporting made in the USA products and services for exports. So that's basically it. Remember, we only have two basic products, supporting financing and credit insurance. And that's about it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Susan, that was great. What a great elevator pitch. I didn't think you could do that with the EXIM Bank. So good job. I know I have some follow-up questions and I'm sure others do as well. What I'd like to do though, in the meantime, before we kind of come back to you, I'd like to introduce our other two panelists, and I'd like to start with Ethel. Ethel is the CEO of National Drug Source. And we always like to have somebody who's actually done this, right? We don't just want to talk to people like myself who teach others how to do it. We want people who've actually done it. And I think Ethel would be a great example for this. So Ethel, could I ask you to please say a little bit about yourself and about your company?
Yes, hi everybody. I'm so pleased to be here with all of you this morning. My name, as he mentioned, is Ethel, last name Torres. I have been doing export sales for quite a number of years, actually, since 2003 to be exact. And the name of the company that I run is called National Drug Source. So what we do is we export pharmaceutical products to many different countries. Since we started exporting, it's been probably close to 60 countries now that we've exported to. We started off close to home, the Caribbean and Central America and places like this, and eventually with the assistance of various export institutions that the United States provides. I call them export institutions, but really they're export assistance, right? It's just all of them combined. And that's another thing that you will learn as you continue your export journey, is just how much support there is out there at the state and federal level. But we started to expand more and more. And so today we export to Australia or the Middle East, Southeast Asia, different pockets of Asia, Europe, various places throughout the world. And of course, the product that we export is very highly regulated, so it has been quite a learning curve. But what's interesting about our company is that we are 100% export sales, which when a lot of people hear that, they're quite surprised to and can't quite wrap their heads around the fact that we are 100% export sales. So we also were honored last year with being chosen as the Exporter of the Year by the SBA for the state of North Carolina. And we have also been the recipients of the Governor's Award as well. So we have definitely done quite a bit throughout our time exporting. We have two international facing sites that are localized in Spanish and in Arabic. And we also have an e-commerce site that we've launched that is geared and focused for our international client base. So that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell. My background, just so you know, I used to be a registered nurse. I still have my license, but I don't actively practice anymore. But I was that bedside nurse that was administering those medications to patients, and I felt like that was a very good segue into what I do today, which is to expand the accessibility of medications to many countries overseas that have very, very little local production, or just have very limited access. And so that's what our company does. It facilitates access of these medicines to places that normally would not have access to them. And we do that with a very patient-centric focus, and we only export US FDA approved medicines.
That's great, Ethel. Thank you. Great background. I mean, clearly, if we're looking for someone to show that exports work, you're the one. So great job. Some good points. You talked about localization of websites. I think we're going to kind of circle back to some of that. But I'd like to introduce our third panelist, if I could. Thomas Matthias. He's a senior vice president at EXIM Bank. So we have the exporter, we have the EXIM Bank, but we need, we have the two ends of the sandwich, but we need something in the middle. And I think that's where the bank comes in. And Thomas has some really good insights. He's been doing this a really long time. And Thomas, I'd like to turn it back to you to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background, please.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for that, Mike. Yes, as Mike mentioned, I work for EXIM Bank. EXIM Bank is a super regional bank headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. We are very excited about supporting our exporters and our importers, particularly our exporters. In so doing, we have been in the last couple of years, the EXIM Bank and the SBA leading lender for their programs. We're very proud to do so. Hopefully we can continue that reign in the next couple of years as well. But we focus on our clients that are looking to expand globally. We recognize that most of the world's businesses and population is outside of the US. Typically looking at, 95% of the world's population is outside the US, 75% of businesses outside the US. So we definitely want to partner with companies and help them figure out how to export. And main thing we help them with is, figuring out how to sell and get paid abroad. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and it's been a joy and a pleasure to help small businesses and medium businesses and even large companies go global and achieve the benefits of exporting. Typically, when you export, you get to diversify your revenues, you get a higher profit margins, and you usually have larger sales orders. So it's usually a win-win-win. And most times the foreign buyer loves buying from the US companies because our products are usually more superior to other companies around the world. So it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Thomas, that's great. Thank you so much. I know I have some questions for you as well. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to kind of start off with Ethel, and I want to ask her a question. And we're going to start with the basics here. Exporting seems to be a very difficult path for companies to take when they can easily sell domestic. I realize that's not so much in your case, but you are the poster child for selling internationally. So why export? I know why you export. Why should other companies export?
Well, I think Thomas said a few key things there, and that is, it's profitable. You can expand your customer base exponentially. If you recall Thomas mentioning those stats, it's very, very true. It can also diversify your customer base and provide more stability to your revenue base. Products have different life cycles as well. So the fact that a product perhaps can experience varied demands in your own market, can experience new sales and new markets, because diversified customer base translates into a healthy pipeline of consumers for the products that go through these different life cycles. And it's actually not that different with pharmaceuticals. Sure, you've got your essential medicines, right, that are required no matter what in any market. But believe it or not, even with medicines, they do go through different cycles, and the supply and demand can vary. And so even so, for us, it's definitely true as we expand our customer base. The supply and demand of the different medicines that we provide to overseas markets there's ebbs and flows, and as we continue to add new countries and new customers, new customer base, it definitely makes a difference in terms of our revenues, as we have seen steady growth.
That's great, Ethel. That's a great point. Even though you're 100% export, there are companies out there who usually have a mix. So you may be saying that the cycle is for one country starts to wean off a little bit, maybe temporarily, but the other country picks up. Now you factor in the domestic sales that most other companies listening also have. So the domestic market might be in a different lull, or not just a recession, but whatever it may be. The international markets help offset that. And that's a really valid point. So thank you. I want to ask Susan a question. And before I do, I think, Melissa, it would be great to put the two additional poll questions about payment terms and payment types. If you don't mind, Melissa, putting those out there, please. This question's for Susan. We're hearing why it's important to export. I mean, clearly, I think we don't have to convince too many people that are listening, but I think companies domestically are more inclined to ask for cash in advance, but internationally, a lot of times people take that domestic ideology to international and say, well, we're going to charge cash in advance now and forever for all our export customers. And that might work at first, but to be competitive, as you mentioned earlier, Susan, you have to do international, but now how about giving them terms? And with that, how do you ensure that you're going to get paid? And I feel like the EXIM Bank is strategically able to answer this because of the service that they offer.
Very true. As I mentioned, it's so competitive out there. Of course, exporters would prefer cash in advance because they feel that that's the least risky solution. And sometimes also, realistically, they need money for working capital, and that's going to be used, the incoming money, as cash in advance. But as I mentioned, it's truly competitive out there in the international arena. Mm-hmm. So our purpose, EXIM Bank, is to encourage you to provide credit terms to your foreign buyers. Not only that, because we want also to encourage you to venture into countries that you have not ventured before. What we do is we vet your foreign buyer carefully to determine if they're good enough to do business with you and with us. And after you ship on credit terms to the approved foreign buyer and they don't pay, we, EXIM Bank, the US government, would come in to salvage the exporter. We give the money to the exporter and we'll be the one to run after the foreign buyer. And the nice thing about the credit insurance program is that it automatically includes political risk. You may have a very strong foreign buyer, but you really cannot predict, the country risks out there. Example, just like yesterday, right? I have a customer from Egypt. I mean, the foreign buyers from Egypt, they couldn't pay because there's like a government a government halt in sending US dollars because of the foreign exchange risk and restrictions. And of course, I ask our head office, and certainly if they file a claim with us, and I encourage them to do so, and we will pay because it's not their fault. It's not the foreign buyer's fault. They couldn't pay. It categorized as political country risk. So that's how we encourage for exporters to venture out there and consider payment terms, open account.
That's a great point, Susan. So just so I'm clear, you're saying that if a US exporter wants to give terms to their foreign customer and they don't want to take the risk of non-payment, whether it be for any reason, including political risk, the EXIM Bank can give out insurance for up to what, 85 to 95% or something like that, and say, we're going to pay you at the EXIM Bank if your customer doesn't pay you. Is that what export insurance is?
Yeah. It's to encourage you and not only encourage you, so you don't have fear in exporting. I'm going to go by Ethel and Thomas saying that it's good to export. And this is our way of encouraging you to export, and not only to export, but to provide credit terms. You're absolutely correct.
That's great, Susan. That's fantastic. And it sounds like if they get the cost of the export insurance from you up front, they can include the cost of that export insurance in the price of the goods to the customer. So it's really, it's a no loss situation for the exporter. So that's fantastic.
Not only that, because the exporter can discreetly increase the pricing to include the cost, right? Or a one-liner to be obvious to the foreign buyer if they want to pay for the cost. And later on, somebody will talk about the step grant program of EDPNC handling it. And I'm not going to step on somebody's toes to explain that, but it can cover the credit insurance premiums.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Susan. I'd like to ask Thomas a question. We've heard from an exporter. We've heard from the EXIM Bank. Really, it's a two-part question. A lot of times I get the question of why would a bank like Regions Bank, wouldn't they feel like they're competing against the EXIM Bank? Is that true? And the second part is, when you're a bank and you're looking at the challenges and procedures of deciding whether or not to give a loan to an exporter for export finance, what are some of the factors that you consider in that process as a bank?
Thank you, Mike. No, EXIM Bank, quite frankly, and the same for SBA and IFC and USDA programs, they are all our partners. The US government is our partner in this activity. They are not a financial institution. They're not a bank. They don't lend money. They have the ability to provide guarantees and assurance on the monies that I lend. So I really consider them my partner. So always feel free to call me directly or call Susan or anyone else, and they will tell you the same thing. We are partners in this endeavor, in this focus to help our citizens and our companies become better exporters. As far as what we're looking at, we're looking for sustainability of a business. Exporting, unfortunately, is not for the faint. As Etta can tell you, there are great rewards, there's great benefits, there's great upsides. I mean, you're probably working on a $100,000 order from New York to California. Well, that same order in Mexico could be $1 million. That same order in India could be $1 million with a higher profit margins. However, there's so many unknowns because, quite frankly, when we look at foreign markets, they don't have the ability of transparency. So when you sell into that company in California and New York, you can pull up a DNB report. You can Google the company. You can do a lot of research yourself and get comfortable with who that end buyer is. Overseas, they don't have great credit reporting systems. So we have to utilize services of the commercial services. We also have to use third-party services, and you have to usually partner with your bank. A great partner of ours is the EXIM Bank is trade credit insurance providers, whether they're Coface or Allianz or Tradius. They are great partners of ours because they, along with EXIM Bank, can do the work for you by doing some credit analysis on that foreign buyer. The other thing we look at is just how long have they been doing the business in the U.S. and how long have they been doing the business overseas. Doing it in the U.S., shows the proof of content that you know what you're doing, you can manufacture, you can deliver. Now to go overseas. Even if you don't have the ability to do it overseas, we can partner with you and all these other government agencies that are here to help you figure out how to be a good exporter. The biggest thing is that you can manufacture and produce your products. Once you get it on the ports or you get it at your shipyard, there's a number of different ways, whether it's X Works, I'm getting into the weeds now, that the person can come and pick up the product from your warehouse and get it overseas. So the main thing is that you have a viable product, you understand your product, and then we are here to help you understand your foreign buyer. Some of your products are more in demand overseas than they are here in the US, just because, as I mentioned earlier, about the cycle of a business product. So in that regard, if your product is in tremendous demand in Turkey versus, India, whatever, we want to help you figure out how to sell to Turkey, how to sell to India, what are the traditional trade terms that they're comfortable with buying on, and we can help you facilitate that sale. It's a partnership. We're not here to manufacture widgets. We're here to partner with you to help you sell widgets. So I stay in my lane as a banker. I expect you to, do what you do good is manufacture your products, and we're here to help you become good exporters.
That's great, Thomas. I appreciate that. So, back to your first question, you don't compete with the EXIM Bank. It's your partner. It's actually a guarantee of the transaction. So in a way, you as a bank in welcome, and it's actually better for you to have the EXIM involved in a transaction because it lowers your.
Absolutely. It lowers my risk premium. It allows me to do things that I wouldn't normally do. Most U.S. banks have it against in their credit policy not to lend to foreign companies. We can lend to foreign companies and support foreign U.S. exporters exporting globally with the benefit of an EXIM Bank or an SBA.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Before we go on to some more questions, Melissa does have some results from the poll questions. Melissa, can I ask you to share those results with us, please?
Yes, absolutely. Just so everyone knows, not everybody has been able to see them, but quite a few have. So I am going to just read the results for those of you that have not been able to see it. So of those that participated in the poll, which is about 60% of the participants today, the question said, what types of payment terms does your company offer to international buyers? Multiple choice answers included not applicable or not exporting yet. So that's 53% of the participants on the call are not yet exporting. That gives us some insight to the panelists for the remainder of the call. Cash in advance, 33%. Progress payments, which is, for example, 20% down, 20% upon shipment, and 60% upon arrival. 20% responded they offer that type of payment term. 30-day payment terms were 33%. 60-day payment terms were 7% of participants, and 90-day payment terms were offered by 7% of participants.
That's great, Melissa. Thank you for that feedback. It definitely gives some insight for us in our questions and our discussion moving forward. I'd like to turn it back to Susan if I could for a minute. And I know I get these questions quite a bit, and you briefly mentioned answers to these in your introduction, but I want to kind of circle back to it, and I want to encourage those listening to type a question into the chat box if you'd like to know a little further. But it's a two-part question, Susan. Are there any restrictions on the types of goods the EXIM Bank can work with or finance? And what is and how does the company determine the U.S. content requirement for EXIM Bank? These are questions I get quite a bit.
Okay, so the first question is, we have restrictions on military buyers. So, but of course, there are exceptions, two exceptions, maybe like for drug interdiction, or it's for dual purpose instead of dealing with the war. I mean, it's for helping people, like, for example, a helicopter can pick up drowning people, it's for humanitarian reasons and drug interdiction. And also, let's see, what else? Any product that would hurt our reputation. Like, for example, products dealing with, how do I say that discreetly? Mating enhancements, something like that. You know what I mean?
No, you're going to have to expand. We're all friends here. Don't worry that if the record button is on, it's just us talking now.
It began with an S. Come on.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there.
Mating enhancements. How else can I say it?
No,
which will destroy our reputation.
It's all good. It's all good. We're adults here. We got it.
Okay, your next question is how to determine U.S. content, right? For transactions with EXIM Bank, it's either 1 year, I'm talking about tenors, or 5 years, and so forth. Typically, for credit insurance and for working capital, it's typically 1 year. Typically, I said it can be beyond that. And it's 51% U.S. content. When it comes to foreign buyers financing, it's lending to foreign buyers, and that's on a term loan, which is like 5 years or more. The U.S. content becomes 85% U.S. content. Let's be simple. Let's go back to 1 year transaction, at least 51% U.S. content. Let me give you an example. How about, if if one buys a t-shirt from the Philippines, that's where I am from actually, right, for $1, and it comes here to the US, and the export tie-dyes it, puts embroideries, put fringes, etc. And the cost is also $1, right? And then it's exported to countries that we can do business with. That to us will already meet the US content. So US content means including engineering, design, labor, overhead to that small component coming in. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's perfect. I get that question quite a bit. Can you include overhead? Can you include employee benefits? You know, once you start doing that, you realize that hitting that 51% US content isn't as hard as many companies think. So
Correct.
that's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I know we have another poll question going, and Melissa, you just let me know when you get the results. Thank you. Ethel, I'm going to kind of turn it back to you. We've kind of heard what the bank does. We've heard what Susan does, but you're the boots on the ground. You're the one who's actually doing it. And, you know, have you had export credit insurance? Have you ever had to use it or enact it? And how long is that process? What was it like?
So yes, I have used different services from the EXIM Bank. Probably the one that I've used the most is the export credit insurance. In doing so, I distinctly remember many years ago when we first started to use it, the nervousness as an exporter, as a small business owner that I felt.
Yeah.
Releasing that order for the first time without getting payment in advance, and knowing, but at the same time realizing, well, wait a minute, you know, I'm covered. So I always tell people that it's insurance to help you sleep better at night. And so knowing that if anything went wrong, such as, you know, I'll never forget, this was a customer that we had in Venezuela, and a dear friend of ours as well, and him letting us know, I think this is the last order I'm going to be able to place with you. And we're like, well, you know, what's going on? He says, I really fear I won't be able to get enough currency, just like what Susan mentioned, out of Egypt, to get the dollars that I need to pay you the next time. Of course, this was so many years ago that back then I didn't know. I was a very inexperienced exporter, and for me the only way I knew how to receive a payment was in US dollars. Of course, Thomas can tell you there's other ways to receive payments now. But, you know, even so, there were challenges, so many challenges, as you know, as things developed in Venezuela, and, you know, the unfortunate series of events. But having said that, yes, absolutely. The EXIM Bank has been very instrumental in helping us. I'll never forget when we first started, we were able to double our revenue within a matter of a year, simply because we were able to start to tell different customers, okay, we're ready now. We can provide credit terms, and we started with 30-day terms. We started with customers that we had been doing, you know, business with for a little while. Even so, we submitted them to the EXIM Bank, and I'm trying to speak in a very practical way for people here that have never, because I noticed so many of you have never exported before. And so I want to keep it very simple in telling you that it's a simple, straightforward process that you would use, and you would work with the EXIM Bank, and they're the ones that help you vet that customer and help you determine what that line of credit, you know, should be for that particular buyer, and that those checks and balances are there. And so I just want to encourage anybody here that is fearful of starting that journey. I want to tell you this: I've been doing this since 2003, and I've had one instance of non-payment from a foreign buyer. I think that beats a lot of records for many of you out there that do business with domestic companies only. One time in 20 years. And believe it or not, the customer eventually paid. It took 10 months but they paid. And so if you know, they didn't pay in full, but they tried their best to pay. So I guess what I am trying to say is don't be fearful of foreign buyers, because our experience has been a positive one.
That's great
Thank you.
advice, Ethel. And you know, I want to just emphasize one point that you made, especially because we have half the people are new to export. It sounds like you didn't just give terms to every international customer from day one. You've built up, they built up trust and a reputation. You started with cash in advance. You mentioned you went to 30 days and then you went beyond that. So I think that's an important lesson, because generally international customers will come to you day one and say, can you give me terms? And it's trust that they had to earn in order to get to the point where you can give them terms and then get the export credit insurance. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say. It's also important to mention, you got to know your customer. You got to take the time to do the due diligence to know your customer. Also, you know, I think that it's important to mention that I remember some customers saying, you know, we have transferred over this much more business to you because we get with terms with you, and your competitor is not giving us any credit terms. So, you know, it definitely makes a difference.
That's great. I appreciate that, Ethel. And that's exactly why we have you here, is to say, you know, what is it like? And those numbers, you know, one person out of 20 years, and you ended up still getting payment. That's incredible. So.
And Mike, if I can add to that too.
Yeah, we both want to. Go ahead.
If I can add to that too, you know, for you exporting here in the US or manufacturing in the US, think of this question: what terms do you get from your suppliers, and what difference does it make in your manufacturing process and your cash flow process? Is the same consideration for your foreign buyers overseas, particularly when you're shipping overseas to China or Asia, the Middle East or Africa. It can take anywhere from 60 to 90 days before the pandemic, and it's now up to 85 to 100 days since the pandemic. It's coming back down a little bit. So that's cash they're out of pocket. So I noticed a lot of you guys in the poll questions had cash in advance as your method of payment. I encourage you to graduate from that. Ethel can tell you the benefit of graduating means larger sales volume, because usually people can buy more if you give them terms to bring your products into their country and sell it. They have a better cash conversion cycle. So it's a win-win when you give longer terms. And as mentioned, in a different way you can do so, we can mitigate that risk as well.
That's
Yeah,
great.
and I wanted to chime in just to give perhaps a quick an example or two of things that might have worked out slightly different than for Ethel. Susan, tell me your experience here. So since I started my position last fall, I've had one or two instances where companies have reached out to me in dire straits because of non-payment. And then, of course, if they haven't been introduced to EXIM Bank and Susan yet, I make sure they know about EXIM Bank's ability to help protect them through credit insurance. But a lot of times those introductions come a little bit too late. And so I'm just going to take that opportunity. I know Ethel has had very good luck over the last couple of decades, but Susan, can you maybe tell us an example or two of companies that kind of find out about you a little bit too late? Do you have any examples to give us, just as a cautionary tale, because there are both ends of that story?
Oops. There are two kinds of credit insurance policies, of course. One is the multi-buyer, wherein it's an umbrella coverage that would include foreign buyers to fall underneath the umbrella coverage, right? And one is the one-on-one credit insurance policy. You collapse the umbrella and it becomes one-on-one. So when it becomes to one-on-one, of course, there's a minimum payment of $500, which is a minimum advance premium. And if you don't use it, goodbye $500. But when it comes to the multi-buyer, right, there's a $500 same amount, but it's policy issuance fee for small businesses that can be refundable. So what I'm saying is, we don't want to waste money, right? Just make sure that If qualified, I would suggest the multi-buyer because it's refundable $500. And if you're just starting, I would like to introduce you to the introductory level, which is express insurance, but it's only up to 10 foreign buyers. So if you're not really, if you don't have very serious foreign buyers, don't include them in the umbrella coverage because you only have 10. Don't waste the effort. You have to make sure that they're very serious foreign buyers.
Can I also chime in? Even till today, I have a mix of customers that we give credit terms to and cash in advance.
Yeah.
It's still that way till today. I just wanted to throw that out there in case anybody's wondering, well, gosh, does she give all of her clients in all of these countries credit terms? The answer is no.
That's great, Ethel. And this is perfect. This is exactly what people want to hear. They want to hear what companies are actually doing. Before I ask Melissa about the poll results, I just want to follow up on Susan's point. I've been doing this, 28, 29 years now, and I get a lot of feedback when it comes to export insurance and things like that. And although there are private companies out there who offer export insurance, I've been told that they're much more expensive than the EXIM Bank. And I've always wondered, why is that? And my take on it is that it's federally subsidized in a way through the US Treasury. So they're able to offer it at a lower cost that private companies just can't do. So there are others out there that do it, but the feedback that I've received is that it's much more expensive through private companies, and it's much less expensive to get it through the EXIM Bank. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Susan.
Well, we're the US government, and our goal is not to be profitable out there to gouge some customers, right? Our basic goal is to really help exporters just increase their international sales. And I did mention about the STEP grant program we're in. Some exporters can get, grant program free money when you hear grant, right? And it's applicable to EXIM Bank credit insurance premiums. Cheryl, did you want to talk about?
It's a great point. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah,
Cheryl?
it's a great segue. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, so the STEP grant is available to apply for to receive reimbursement for EXIM credit insurance. Our new program year will begin September 30th of this year and will run into September 29th of 2024. So you could, what happens as far as reimbursement is you would continue to pay the credit insurance, and then at the end of the program or when you reach the maximum amount, that is the time at which you would submit for reimbursement. You would need to provide reports as proof of payment of those premiums, but it would be reimbursable through the STEP grant.
That's great. And for those of you who don't know, that's Cheryl. She is the North Carolina STEP trade manager for the whole state. So she's the person that actually is the one who administers the STEP program in the state of North Carolina. You're hearing it right from her. So thank you, Cheryl, for being on the call and for participating.
Yeah, sure. And if you are interested, once the program rolls out, contact your international trade manager who is responsible for your industry. They'll kind of talk through what you want to do with the grant, and assuming EXIM is one of the things you want to do. They'll then let me know to send you an application. Everything's been automated, so you'll receive an automated email with a link to your company specific application. And it's at that point you would be able to identify EXIM credit insurance as one of the offerings that you would like to apply for. So that's how the process would begin.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it. Melissa, I know you asked a second poll question. I wasn't able to see it, but I think that others could.
Yes, yes.
Share the
I'm not
results?
sure. It's a mystery, but yes. So the second, this particular poll question reads, what types of payment methods do you use with international buyers? Again, this was multiple choice, so more than one option I think could be responded to. 38% responded they use open accounts. 63% responded cash. 13% responded documentary collections. those that have questions about that, we could speak to that after. And then 38% responded letters of credit. So I'm sure that the group will make sure everyone is aware of those. Again, 38% open, 63% cash, 13% documentary collections, and 38% responded letters of credit.
That's great. Thank you.
Just to comment on that, guys, keep in mind, it's not a one size fits all. Certain markets, I can tell you that you probably cannot get an LC from because of how that market banking system is. Other market lends itself to trade credit insurance. Other market lends itself to open account or documented collections. So it's really a case by case, and there's a regional decision that you have to make. As far as a question earlier, as far as trade credit insurance premiums, yes, EXIM Bank is a little bit more cheaper, not as much. I can tell you private insurance has come down a lot. The biggest difference is that private insurance, you pay upfront versus EXIM Bank, you pay as you go. So that's really the biggest difference. And a lot of times, you know, if you are able to embed that insurance premium in your invoice, because at the end of the day, you're providing your foreign buyer terms. Remember, anything outside of cash, you are financing those sales. Whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you're financing your sales. If you're financing your sales, you're essentially acting as a bank and lending money to your clients. Therefore, you should be compensated and try to compensate for that cost. So what you usually try to do is put that interest cost, because you got to finance your loan, and you also got to put your insurance premium into that invoice to compensate yourself for that terms you're giving your clients.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. What I'd like to do with the remaining time, we only have about 8 minutes or so left. We want to open it up to questions, specific questions you might have for any of our speakers here. Let me just see if we can, I can go to the chat. Actually, I had the chat open. Here we go. So just go ahead, type your questions that may be relevant for the guest speakers that we have on today with the remaining time. While we're waiting for the questions to come over the chat, just two things I want to mention quickly. We heard the question was about documentary collections and letters of credit. Letter of credit is just a guarantee. It's a glorified contract that if you don't do, if the exporter and the buyer, they don't do what's listed in the letter of credit, then you don't get paid. It's a guaranteed contract of payment as long as both parties do what's listed in the letter of credit. It's a long process. It can be expensive, but it's necessary in some situations. It's not a catch-all provision. And of course, the kicker is you lose the guaranteed confirmation of the letter of credit if there's a discrepancy, meaning somebody didn't do something that was in the letter of credit. Whereas a documentary collection is different. A documentary collection is not a guaranteed payment. It's basically what I call cash against documents, whether it be through the bank or whether it be through a freight forwarder. So it's kind of a step down from a letter of credit in that there's no requirement that they purchase from you, where under a letter of credit there is. But under the documentary collection, the bank or the freight forwarder will hold on to the documents necessary to clear foreign customs, such as the commercial invoice, the packing list, the bill of lading. And without those, the customer ultimately cannot get delivery of the goods. So in theory, and the theory is once the documents get handed over to the buyer, once the buyer makes payment to you, then the documents get handed over at that time. Now, it may all be electronic, but you get the idea. So documentary collection is different than a letter of credit, right? Okay, perfect. So let's see, we have some questions. Can you ensure the export of services, for example, maintenance on industrial manufacturing equipment? So I think that question is for Susan. Good question.
Yes. I previously mentioned, right? We support products and services to be exported to countries that we can do business with. So certainly services are covered.
Excellent. That's a great point and a good question. Thank you, Susan. Any other questions or comments? Looks like we have another question. Contracts in language and law systems. Does the EDPNC or the bank help the client to understand them? I think this is kind of a broader question for the EDPNC. Melissa, is this something you might be able to answer?
So contracts in language and law systems, some specific background business aspects of your export journey. We have other ecosystem partners that can kind of sit next to you and help you with contracts. We have colleagues that are international business counseling, providing free export counseling as part of the Small Business and Technology Development Center, or SBTDC. Part of that they would be able to provide guidance on. And if they aren't able to provide the law systems guidance that you're seeking, we have private sector partners that we can that we've worked with before. So what I would recommend is that you reach out to your international trade manager, find our email addresses on the website, and we can make the proper introduction for you. The international business counselors, as part of SBTDC, help companies based on what region of North Carolina your company is. So please reach out to us and we will make the appropriate introductions for you.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. While we're waiting for a few more questions, we have about 4 more minutes for the program. I want to ask Susan about the time frame. You know, if someone approaches you about export insurance or getting a loan, I realize it depends, but is there, I mean, people aren't waiting 6 months to get an answer from the EXIM Bank. What are some average timeframes for the services that you offer?
Well, I will speak about credit insurance because that's a direct relationship between EXIM Bank and the exporter. Once I receive everything that's required to apply for credit insurance, then it's submitted to the underwriter, and it typically takes 10 business days for the underwriter to make a decision. When it comes to loans, we don't lend directly, we lend through our delegated lender like Regions Bank. So Regions Bank will be the one to answer that question.
Thanks, Susan. Thomas? Thomas, in terms of a loan for an international bank, I realize it's very dependent on the amount, the customer, the country.
Yeah.
These are all factors. But again, if someone's listening and they haven't exported yet, and they're trying to figure out at what point in the process should they approach the bank for the loan, you know, what can you give an average time frame that it might take for a company to get a response from the bank in terms of?
Yeah, it is always good to approach your banking partners sooner rather than later. Help us provide you our guidance and our expertise. Help us figure out your payment method and also which of the programs is better for your needs. Like I said, we are pretty good at doing export working capital loans. Whether it's EXIM Bank or SBA, both programs work fantastically. SBA, as you may know, doesn't have a military prohibition. So where in which EXIM talked about earlier, they cannot do military sales, the SBA can. The only problem with SBA is that they only go up to $5 million. So there's a lot of different things that we can help advise you on that. Typically, if we get a complete package in, which is 3 years of financial statements and, you know, a full company overview, we can process the loan within 3 to 4 weeks.
That's fantastic. That's great. And thank you for the advice for others listening about SBA loans for military type goods, but a lower threshold for the amount of the loan. So thank you.
Yeah. And also SBA doesn't also have any US content requirement. So when you import those T-shirts from China and you put your name on them, even though the content may still be 80% China, once they're being re-exported from the US, SBA will cover that as part of their total loan amount.
All right, thank you. So we have 1 minute left. Are there any burning questions that anyone has that we're hoping you were going to get answered today but didn't? Now's your chance. I guess, Melissa, with your permission, if somebody wanted to quickly ask a question, they can unmute themselves. Is that possible?
Yep, sounds great.
All right, so any last questions? Now's your chance.
Yeah, and if you haven't noticed, I put my email address in the chat, so you could just shoot me an email and I'll make sure that you're connected with your appropriate trade manager or make the introduction to SBTDC.
Great. All right.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
appreciate all of the knowledge. Panelists, thank you for being here. Mike, thank you for your time. Those of you that have not yet had the opportunity to benefit from Mike's depth of experience on international trade issues, you will see his name pop up. If you are following our events page, or if you're opening the emails that introduce you to new opportunities to learn about export related specific compliance issues, logistic issues, just business issues, you will see that free 2-hour-long, very detailed sessions are provided by Mr. Michael Aka via EDPNC. So keep an eye out for those. Susan, can you please type your email address into the chat so that everyone can reach out to you? Same for Thomas. If you could please type your email address into the chat so everyone can have access to that. Ethel, as usual, you're a rock star. Thank you for being part of our ecosystem here. You're not just a North Carolina company, but you're truly a part of the journey of so many other companies, and you're offering your expertise is very much appreciated. Please reach out to Ethel or just ping her, let her know that you're interested in a side conversation. And she's very gracious with her time and would do that. Oh, and Sarah, thank you. Sarah has taken the initiative to offer her contact information. Let's do that for one another as North Carolina companies as well, because we can see there are some multiple manufacturers that have participated in the call. You can work with each other to support each other on your export journey. So I do encourage you all to offer your email address if you're interested in doing some offline networking as well. Ethel has given us a link to her LinkedIn. So that is a great opportunity to connect as well. This is recorded, so if you know of colleagues that missed the talk, we will provide you with a link in our follow-up email. So look for that when we introduce next month's topic. You will see the link to this recording. So we thank you for your time, for participating. And again, I'm going to echo what Cheryl, our grants manager, said when she came online, is that our grant cycle is going to be upon us for next fiscal year very, very soon. September 30th will come before we know it. I encourage everybody to schedule a meeting with your international trade manager at EDPNC. So schedule an appointment to review what grant offerings make sense for your company, discuss your strategy over the next year so that you can be prepared with your grant application once that money becomes available October 1st. So anybody else want to chime in from EDPNC or the panel before we say goodbye? Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.